To get yourself a good old bit of dick. I'm a slapping booty, right? Voila!
Те са различните, те са малцинството, те са остракираните, те са жертви на жестокия патриархат. Те имат право да бъдат себе си, което значи да бъдат онова, което си решат. Така мисли неолибералната световна културна пропаганда от последните десетилетия. Тя превърна идеологията на различните в привилегия на малцинствата и диктат над нормалността. Под благоприличното "и те имат права" се проведе нежна ЛГБТИ революция, която отрече моралните основи на стария свят, отхвърли категориите и границите и заяви, че всеки може да е каквото си иска, без оглед на биология, физика, научни твърдения, религия. И така, неусетно заживяхме във времената, в които всяко традиционно понятие се разфасова, за да стигнем до абсурдната невъзможност да отговаряме на прости въпроси като какво е жена и колко пола има.
You don't think that there really is any clear-cut distinction between male and female as biological categories, is that correct?
So I do not define what a woman is because I do not identify as a woman. Womanhood is something that is an umbrella term.
What is a woman? Can you tell me that?
От другата страна на трансджендър идеологията обаче се оказва, че стоят хиляди съсипани човешки животи, разрушени семейства, отнето детство, разбити сърца. Питали ли сте се, що за трагедия е, ако се случи вашият мъж да се окаже транс? Звучи като сценарий от кофти филм, но има цяло общество от жени с срутени животи, защото са попаднали в гигантска лъжа. Тези жени наричат себе си транс-вдовици.
Tell me about trans widows. What's a trans widow and what happens to the children of trans people?
So that would be a woman who is married to what she thought was just a regular heterosexual man who is then gaslit, suffers coercive control and this cycle of abuse, humiliation in which their husband then identifies as a woman. And it's a really mean and devious and abusive situation for those women and those children.
Искам да бъда жена. Никакви индикации, че е нещо различно от мъж. Да имаш гърди и пенис е неговата идея за рай. Безброй перуки, дамски дрехи, специализирано порно в интернет. Аз съм транссексуален. През цялото време, докато бях с него, нямаше абсолютно никакви индикации, че е нещо различно от мъж с хетеросексуални интереси и хобита. Докато един ден той се къпеше, аз влязох и го заварих да си бръсне краката. Попитах защо, а той каза: искам да бъда жена. Съпругът ми беше обсебен от гърдите и фантазираше, че ги има. Веднъж ми каза, че да имаш гърди и пенис е неговата идея за рай. По-късно не е складово помещение. Оказа се, че новият бизнес на съпруга ми е заснемане и продажба на специализирано порно в интернет. Когато ме напусна, мъжът ми остави вкъщи няколко вещи. Беше ги оставил в шкаф, където със сигурност щях да ги намеря. Когато го попитах какви са тези неща, той просто отговори: аз съм транссексуален. И това беше цялото обяснение, което получих.
My name is Una Jane Winfield. I live in London. I have just turned 70 years of age. My experience as a woman married to a very strange man started in 1992, and he left us 14 years later in 2006. The two children, our two children, were born in 1994 and 1996. I had no idea that he had any mental problems until about just after the birth of the second child, when I realized that his behavior was changing in a way that I had never witnessed in any man before, had never heard about. It seemed to me what I described later as a male chauvinist pig, but that I did not understand anything about the reasons for his behavior because he told me absolutely nothing in all those 14 years of marriage.
Това е историята на Уна Джейн Уинфилд, 70-годишна англичанка, майка на 2 деца и някога обикновена съпруга, която се превръща в транс-вдовица. Той не използваше думата мъже, а казваше хора с мъжки убеждения. Тоест, той е вярвал, че да си мъж е въпрос на избор, а не биологичен факт. Това е било доказателство за неговата транссексуалност, но аз го приемах просто за странност.
From 2002, he started growing his hair long, much longer than normal. It was greasy, and also his skin started to look really shiny. And this was because his beard was not growing properly. Also, he put on weight. He started to look flabby. He had more fat around, not just the middle, but also, I realized later, over his shoulders and, yes, in, a region around his nipples. He, from then on, refused to let me see him naked. We had no sex after that, of course.
I think I can see your beard.
You can see my beard? Oh, no!
When my son was nearly 12 and my daughter was nearly 10, he suddenly, out of the blue, put in a cupboard in the spare bedroom, he put a dress from a cheap company called Dorothy Perkins and a pair of shoes in a size 9. They were enormous shoes. And a letter from MasterCard, from NatWest MasterCard, credit cards, 2 credit cards side by side, one in his proper name, which was Warren Paul Hodgkins, and the other in the name of Elizabeth Hodgkin, and he left them where I would find them.
Do I look scary? Do you know what I am? No?
I was in a state of shock. I can't remember what he said. He did admit that they were his. But then, what was important, he walked out of the house. It was quite cold, a cold day in March. And he turned around to me in the street, in the Furnival Gardens, which is next to us. And he said, "It's true, I'm a transsexual." That's all, just those words. And that was the first time I had ever heard that word or any idea or any explanation, if it was an explanation, of what was wrong with him. And then he continued walking away from me quite fast. And I was left just spinning, as if someone had sucked all the air out of the room. And I didn't know what to ask. I couldn't chase after him. He had created such terrifying life. I mean, we lived side by side in the same house, but completely separate lives.
Welcome to Transgender Science class.
But what I did realize was that his behavior that I saw was that he was incredibly narcissist. He was proud. There are some hints. He was proud of his small feet. He said that they were only a size 9, and most men have feet a size 10, 11, 12. He was proud of the shape of his legs. He thought that they looked shapely and attractive for a man. He was proud that he thought he looked young for his age. Well, he didn't really, but, you know, he had this narcissistic belief. In either 1 or 2 years before he left us, so in 2000, maybe it was 2003, 2004, he spent a night without telling me what he was doing. He was out of the house, and then the following morning he rang the doorbell and I let him in, and he was wearing a wide-brimmed hat, you know, a fedora, which he never wore, and his face was completely swollen. His eyes were swollen. He was obviously unwell. I said, have you been mugged? Have you been attacked? Have you reported this to the police? He said nothing. He came up the stairs, he went into the spare bedroom, and he went to sleep. And then the following day, he told me that he'd had a facelift. Exactly, at his age. He was by then 65, and I was 20 years younger. I was 46. I was 19 years younger than him. I was astonished. I was horrified that he did this without discussing this with me, that he was hiding this secret ambition to do this.
Уна е съсипана. Месеци след като Пол я напуска, тя получава свирепи паникатаки. Не може да се държи на краката си. Успява да преодолее кризите с помощта на интензивни сесии при психиатър.
3 months later, in the first week in July, which was the week of our son's birthday, I think it was the day before the scheduled party for my son, you know, because he was only 12, inviting all his little friends. He just suddenly burst out, getting angry. He opened the front door and he slammed it shut, and we didn't see him again. We didn't see him for 15 months. And I had seen him every single day for the previous 14 years. He gave non-answers. He just refused to answer any questions. So my problem was that I was pulling back and trying to ask any question that he would actually answer. I had to continue. We went on holiday separately. And then at Christmas, a week before Christmas, I said by email, and the children had his email address, and we wrote together saying, "Are you coming back for Christmas?" And he refused, gave no explanation. Absolute silence. Finally, through this extremely disjointed exchange of communication, he revealed that he had been to a psychiatrist, that he had a report by the psychiatrist about his mental state. So, of course, I wanted that. Now, so, yes, about 15 months after he left, in October 2007, at half term, so we had a 2-week break, the children were not at school. One day, out of the blue, on a Wednesday, we got in the car. I had prepared the children. I said to them, we're going, as if we were the police, we're going to get the evidence that Paul has given for his statement that he is now a woman. I want to see his clothing. I want to take photographs of it. And you're going to help me. I wanted them to be with me because that would calm him down and he would not behave as badly in front of them as he would with me. And that is exactly what happened. When we rang the doorbell, he didn't answer, although we could see that his car was there. He was in a place where you simply couldn't get anywhere without a car, so he was definitely there. 15 minutes later, he came down and he was wearing trousers and he looked dazed. We stayed, I'll cut this story quite short. We stayed for a total of 3 hours it was actually. It was a long time. We went into the house. He tried to engage us in conversation. I said, I'm sorry, we're here for a purpose. We need evidence. And we took the camera around and we found a cupboard in the downstairs bedroom and it had a padlock on it. And I said, Paul, you're going to open this door now. And he did reluctantly. And that is indeed where we found the female clothes, put them out on the bed, took photographs of those clothes. Then we went upstairs because I had a second objective to get this psychiatrist report. There he became extremely angry and refused. He refused for about 3/4 of an hour. I said, I'm not going anywhere. We are staying until you either give us this letter or a copy of the letter. He said, oh, I don't have a fax machine. In those days, you could use a fax machine to make a copy of an original. I said, that's okay. Give me the original letter. He took the letter and he tore off the top, which had the address of the person that this letter was addressed to. And he said, okay, you can have that. And then I was preparing to leave and one of the children wanted a glass of water. She was thirsty. It had taken a long time. It was exhausting. There was no rapprochement at all. I was there on business and the kids knew that when mum was on business, she meant it. I went to the kitchen to get a glass of water for Lucy and then I made a mistake, a serious mistake. Paul came in following me alone. We were in the kitchen alone. I said, please get your hair cut. I said for the second time, please get your hair cut. And then I saw a small pair of scissors, which were no longer than this. That's a slim with a blunt end, kitchen scissors. I held them up and he turned into a madman. He flew across the kitchen. He grabbed my hand. He scraped it on the wall behind me and then the whole of my body on the wall and tore my trousers. At this point, I said, it's okay. It's okay. We're just leaving. And I dropped the scissors. I had to because he hurt me. He said, I'm going to call the police. I'm going to call the police. I said, it's okay. You don't have to call the police. We're going. I went to collect the children. We went out of the house. We got home at 9:30 and I was in a hell of a state. I was really, really upset. And I did nothing. 3 weeks later, I got a phone call from Sussex police saying, we want to talk with you about the incident. What Paul had done the following day, he dressed up in female clothes and he presented himself to Midhurst police station. Now, this was in 2007. We had not gone through the extraordinary, celebrity of Caitlyn Jenner on the front cover of Vanity Fair. There were another 8 years to go before that.
Кейтлин Дженър, родена като Брус Дженър, е американски лекоатлет и телевизионна звезда. На летните Олимпийски игри в Монреал през 1976 година Дженър печели златен медал в десетобоя. След края на спортната си кариера участва в множество телевизионни предавания и в суперхитовото Keeping Up with the Kardashians, заедно с съпругата си Крис и децата им. След развода си, Брус официално обявява, че е транссексуална и винаги се е чувствал като жена. През юни 2015 сменя името си на Кейтлин, появява се на корицата на списание Vanity Fair като жена и създава свой Twitter акаунт с рекорден брой последователи. Получава и собствено реалити предаване, озаглавено "Аз съм Кейт".
1 year since Vanity Fair came out. I can't believe it. It's been 1 year. What a year. Nothing like living your life authentically. It's been so much fun.
Sussex police were confused. It took them 3 weeks to decide what to do about this, and then they made the wrong decision. Instead of saying to Paul, "This is very interesting, but actually you don't have any evidence that your wife attacked you. You don't have any bodily harm. You don't have any witnesses because the children were not in the kitchen and there were no neighbours or any. You come back with some solid evidence." He alleged that I had gestured towards him with the scissors. I was so confused. The police said, "You must come for a chat with us." And I said, "What if I refuse?" They said, "Then we'll arrest you." I said, "Well, that's not a chat, is it?" Anyway, I made an appointment and I went down without talking to any legal representation. Big mistake. I arrived in the police station and they immediately arrested me. I had never done anything to hurt Paul, and the police arrested me. A completely, I am a law-abiding citizen, but I didn't know how the police proceed. Anyway, they certainly intimidated me. They took me down in their car to Chichester police station, where they they said, "Do you want legal representation?" And I said, "Well, yes, I suppose." That was a second big mistake, because they make sure that if you have a solicitor present, then you cannot argue afterwards that you didn't know what you were doing, that you didn't have legal advice. Well, the solicitor didn't know a thing about this. He said, "Oh, well, maybe if you get a caution, all they'll want is a caution for assault." But it's a criminal record. They had my DNA on the police database. They had my fingerprints. I am, as I was at that moment, merely trying to find out the truth from Paul. Anyway, I now have a police record for no reason. I appealed immediately afterwards. I am still tweeting about this on Twitter, saying, "Sussex police, you should apologise. You should take away this. Completely unjustified. You had no reason to pursue me. He was plainly, completely mad." He wanted vengeance for handing over the psychiatry report, because what he wrote in that report was extremely incriminating. It's what first started me on the path that he had planned.
14 години. Всеки Божи ден ти делиш едно легло, една къща, един живот с един мъж. Докато един ден просто той ти казва: "Аз съм транс." И край.
He knew what his problem was. Even before he married me, he'd been married twice before, and both marriages broke down for reasons that he never explained. He said that his second wife started to throw plates at him.
14 години. Всеки Божи ден ти делиш едно легло, една къща, един живот с един мъж. Докато един ден просто той ти казва: "Аз съм транс." И край.
So disruptive, so uncooperative, so determined to destroy the trust, the love, the generosity of the woman he'd married. His behavior was incomprehensible. This is a very strange, it's an occasional, it's almost a voluntary mental disease. Voluntary because he had a choice about whether to go into this frame of mind or to behave as a sensible, reasonable human being. He was a successful architect in private practice. He had friends who he had always behaved fairly reasonably with, although he tended to be dependent on them. There was a childishness about this, about his behavior, as I realized later. He was reticent. And for somebody who'd been a lecturer at the School of Architecture in Brighton for a number of years, who'd worked in local authority architecture and building departments for many years, it was very strange that he didn't have more success, to be honest. But having been divorced twice and given away 2 houses, I should have been aware there were alarm bells ringing. But look, he was tall, he was good looking, he was intelligent, he was a chess player, he was interested in sailing of all kinds. I lived in an old house, and his work as an architect, a lot of his work was with old houses, doing refurbishments or extensions. I thought he was perfect. He could be a good father, and I would look after him in old age, you know, the age difference. And we fitted together well sexually. I'm without going into too many details, I found it quite difficult to find a man who was the right person, the right man for me. And I thought I ignored these red flags. One of the most terrifying aspects of my life after Paul left was the possibility that he would go to the court and demand that he had meetings with his children. So in order to forestall this, I said, oh, yes, I agree that you can meet the children, but only in the presence of another person, an independent witness. He agreed to this. I found a lady who actually was in my babysitting circle, and I said, Jackie, would you do that? And she said, okay, well, I can do this day and in this place. And Paul would say, oh, well, I can't do that day and that place. Long story short, 2-3 years went by. The children realized that he never sent them anything. He never offered any sensible activities. He even sent my daughter for her birthday a mouse like this, you know, but made out of rhinestones and pink. A pink. This is queer theory. This is the delusional pornographic state. The children realized as the years went by that he just did not behave like any father that they knew from their friends. After he left in 2006, he started sending them pleading emails. He was whining. He wanted them to feel pity for him. He also said that I was pushing him, that I was a wicked person and pushing him apart from his children, which was nonsense, because he had an opportunity to come anytime he liked back to my house. In fact, I mean, within a couple of months of him leaving, I said to him, you can come and see us anytime, provided that you wear trousers and you behave as a father to our 2 children. He never, ever came into the house again. And the only 2 times that we went to see him in his house was once when he gave me afterwards a criminal record. And then the second time, again, with the 2 children, but by this time quite grown up, just before the end of the divorce proceedings, to try and force him to write a will that left an distribution, equal distribution among his 3 children. He refused to do this. He refused to accept the divorce petition that I sent to him in the name of Warren Paul Hodgkins, the man I'd married. He sent it back saying, I am now Elizabeth Hodgkins. You know, this is petty. This is childish. This is insane. He wanted a divorce, but he wanted the playful psychopath. He wanted to enjoy the divorce. He did. He was enraging. He was bewildering because no normal adult behaves like this. And then he was terrifying. He lived alone. He spent his time, I think, going to second-hand sales, you know, of bric-a-brac and clothing. He was 70 years old when he went to see Dr. James Barrett, who is the psychiatrist in charge of the Gender Identity Service at Charing Cross Hospital, which, by the way, is about a 5-minute drive from my house in London. He could have come at any time to visit us, particularly in the 2 years that it took to get the signature on the application for a gender recognition certificate. His choice, he didn't want to see us. He committed suicide sometime just before the 4th of April 2022. He was found with severe head injuries which caused bleeding. He was dead because of that. From a window that projected over a paved terrace. There was a two-floor distance. He was bound to be killed by sliding out of that window.